Hey, Cal.
Hey, how's it going?
Great. How are you?
Oh, I'm pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Can I see a quick show of hands? How many people here use Slack in their workplace? Wow, that's a lot of hands. That's a lot of hands. You guys seem like you came just out of nowhere. Slack is already almost a verb. Like I have people say, "Yeah, I slacked you this, I slacked you that." Obviously, a lot of people are using it, but it's actually got a very long history. Maybe you could start off by telling folks how you and your co-founder met.
Sure. Yeah, you actually have to go back more than a decade into kind of like my first love, which was online video games. And so, like, co-founder and CEO of Slack, Stuart Butterfield, he started a company in the early 2000s to make a massively multiplayer online game, web-based, called Game Never Ending, which was a pretty weird thing to do at the time. There weren't really online games at that point. This is pre-social networks. The internet was a very different place, and what he was doing was super interesting, and I wanted to get involved. But I was like a nobody working in London doing web stuff, and so obviously what I did was break into their email server
Sure.
and join their internal mailing lists to find out what they were doing, and then use that as leverage to convince him to hire me.
As one does, yeah.
Yeah, like the age-old story.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I just hacked my way into the company. But you guys didn't end up working on Game Never Ending very long, right? What came out of that?
No, like as soon as I joined the company, we ran out of money and had to figure out something else. And we were trying to figure out what we could do as a side business to generate some money to keep funding the game development. We built Flickr, the photo sharing website. And the intention was that it would be a quick project. We'd just work on it for a couple of months and spin something up that could fund game development. But it was just the right product at the right time, and Flickr was hugely successful, and so the company pivoted to just work on Flickr and stop building this game. And that was back in 2004.
You eventually sold Flickr to Yahoo, left Yahoo after a few years, and then you and Stuart got back together again to do what?
Basically do the same thing again. So it was Stuart, myself, and a couple of the other Flickr co-founders. We started another company to build a web-based, massively multiplayer online game. We had learnt nothing in the intervening period. And so we tried to build this game called Glitch. And we worked on it. Are there any Glitch players in the audience? Yeah, that's why it didn't work out.
Yeah, a lot of Slack hands, not many Glitch hands.
We worked on that for 4 years. We're really bad at making games, it turns out. But after 4 years, we wound the company down, and we were trying to figure out what we wanted to do next. And during that time, we had an office in San Francisco and an office in Vancouver in Canada, and we'd been using IRC to communicate. All of our designers and illustrators, sound design, level design, as well as our developers and our, G&A, accountants and such, we all used IRC. And over the course of 4 years building the game, we'd built all of these things on top of IRC to, first make it really easy to see all of the messages that we've sent in the past, because that's not something that's built in, and then to be able to search them, to be able to easily send them on mobile and stay in sync with what you've read. And so we built all of this kind of cruft on top of IRC over the course of those 4 years. And when we shut the game down and we were looking for what to do next, we realized that whatever it is we did, we wouldn't want to work without a system like that again. And so we thought, well, maybe other people would like a system like that. And that's how Slack was born.
And so Slack launched to the public when?
What year is it now? 2 years.
2016, yes. So
2014, yeah, 2 years ago.
And you're at tens of thousands of organizations now, is that
Tens
correct?
of thousands of companies, yeah, millions of daily active
That's
users.
really fast growth.
Yeah, for a piece of business software, it's like unprecedented growth.
How did you handle that growth? What kinds of things did you learn along the way when you're trying to scale up like that?
I think one of the most important things that we took from Flickr was that we don't come from an enterprise software background. We come from a consumer background with games and Flickr, and that the key thing to Flickr and one of the key things to Slack is that it's very customer-centric, in that the most important thing is that we build a product that people love using, that actually makes their working lives simpler, more pleasant, more productive. Not that we're building it as a piece of enterprise software. So for instance, if you're building expense reporting software, there's a chance that you'll never use the software that you're building. But in building Slack, we use Slack every day, so we really feel the pain that our customers feel and feel the joy that our customers feel when it's useful.
And now you've opened up Slack to developers in an interesting way. Well, not just now, but it's been open, but it's opened up to developers in a pretty interesting way. Can you tell us about what you're doing?
I think that's something that's really changed as Slack has grown, is that initially, we're focused on the communication portion, but the platform has really become a differentiator, that's really made Slack have the value that it has for customers. And that is, if you do any kind of business and you use computers today, you use 10, 20, 30, 40 different software products to get your job done. You're using, on the developer side, stuff like source control and continuous integration. You're doing task and project management. You're using accounting software or CRM or ERP. And every company uses a whole bunch of these different bits of software, which are all individually great at what they do. We're in such a better situation than we were 5 or 10 years ago. But none of these things work together because they're not built to work together. But communication is the one place where it really makes sense to tie all of them into one place. And Slack is a great platform for doing that. So what we found really, really powerful as Slack has grown is that whatever tools you're using to get your job done, if we can make them work a little bit better with Slack, then that's a huge win for anybody using it.
And you've got a fund now for this too, right?
Yeah, so because we want to really encourage people to build stuff on the Slack platform because it's great for our customers and great for their customers too, we started up at the end of last year a Slack fund of $80 million to help fund companies that are trying to build bots and apps on the Slack platform.
I'm glad you talk about bots. Bots are like super hot right now. At Facebook's developer conference 2 weeks ago or so,
yeah.
It was just bots. Are you a bots believer?
A bots believer. We'll see. I'm definitely like the skeptic in the company of bots, but there's no doubt that this year conversational interfaces are going to be huge. And I'm definitely a skeptic when it comes to the consumer side. It's like, how much value is there in having a conversation with Pepsi, a Pepsi bot? That remains to be seen.
You don't want
but
to talk to Pepsi bot all the time?
I mean, maybe just once. Yeah. It's probably not going to be a daily occurrence, although who knows, the future could be weird. But I think the place where conversational interfaces are definitely going to be interesting is in the enterprise, in the workspace. So we have a few different bots that are gaining a lot of traction on the Slack platform right now. We have things like Howdy, which lets you set up meetings easily, Birdly, which lets you do expenses easily, and Growbot, which is an HR platform for giving feedback about your teammates. And so we're seeing some really interesting stuff in the enterprise space, and I think Slack is in a great position to be the platform on which that kind of experimentation with bots will take place as people figure out what conversational interfaces are good for. And there's also, we started up a lab in New York to start looking into some more kind of machine learning, natural language processing AI kind of bots for leveraging the huge amount of useful information you put into your Slack instance for getting more out of that.
When you started off, almost all of the organizations using Slack were startups. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, when we first started, we were Slack customer number one.
Right.
When we were a 10-person company, and we started getting our friends at other companies to try it in the Valley. But and those were from the beginning. Those were all startups.
I think that's a relatively common thing that happens in the Valley. Like
Definitely.
You build something for enterprise, and you're a startup, and other startups use it, and you kind of know what startups look like, but you don't necessarily know what PepsiCo looks like, or or big businesses like that. How have you had to evolve Slack as you've gone into more traditional enterprises, more traditional large-scale businesses, universities, hospitals?
Gotcha. Yeah, that's it's an interesting question. Today, so Slack is used by a lot of very large companies today. So like 80% of the Fortune 100 use Slack. But Slack was designed as a product for teams, and 10 people are a team, 100 people are a team, 1,000 people are a team. But once you start to think about tens or hundreds of thousands of people, then the product design becomes a little bit different. You start to need different things like better administrative controls and security controls, access controls that you don't necessarily think about in a smaller company. So as we focus on larger and larger deployments of Slack, those are things that we need to focus on this year with what we're calling our enterprise product.
Are you going to include threading in that? Everybody's demanding. One of the guys I work with, just every day, is when is Slack going to do threading? When is Slack going to do threading?
We've been working on threading for a little while. like with everything we build, we're taking a lot of time over getting it just right so that it feels right. A lot of intention goes into everything we design on the product, and we've had some version of threading on our internal Slack for some time, and it's changed completely many times. Hopefully it'll come out soon, but we're really narrowing down on what it should feel like within Slack.
And that's just one aspect of how conversations change as they grow to many thousands of people. What else have you had to change from a technology standpoint to support those larger teams, larger groups?
Yeah, as I said before, a lot of the things that larger teams need is more administrative control, or if you're in regulated industries, you might need FINRA or HIPAA compliance or FedRAMP or things like that, and that's the kind of the unsexy end of business software. That larger customers need these things.
Do you offer all that right now, or what do you?
We offer a variety of those things, and they're all things we're working on with individual customers.
Right.
At the enterprise scale, each individual customer has a lot of very specific needs.
How much do you change Slack based on what you hear from customer feedback? Are you studying what the customers do when you make changes to the products? Are you using data to make those decisions, or are you just what your friends tell you on Twitter, you then go and write a few lines?
I think what our friends tell us on Twitter is the same thing as customer feedback. We get tens of thousands of tweets a month, and that's a large part of what feeds into the feedback cycle in the product. So it's a mix of support cases, us talking to our largest customers, and people talking to us on Twitter. Twitter is such a great channel for customer feedback because people are unafraid to be critical in public, and it's a really rich channel of feedback. So we take all of those channels and build them into the product design and the roadmap.
How automated is that? When someone tweets at Slack HQ, it is at Slack HQ?
At Slack HQ, yeah.
If someone tweets at Slack HQ a feature request, are you able to process that in an efficient way, or does a person have to go and say, oh, I saw this and I'm going to drop it into Cal's channel?
Every tweet is looked at and responded to by a real life human. There's no bots there yet.
And so that would indicate to me that you have a lot of people working at Slack now, right? You said you started off with 10?
It's a little bit bigger than 10 now, yeah.
How big is it now?
I think it's 450-ish.
It's really hard to hire in Silicon Valley right now.
That is
How have you done
true.
that? How have you scaled up hiring?
Hiring definitely in Silicon Valley is very difficult, and it was a lot more difficult for us in the past, like a year ago, 2 years ago. When you're a company that isn't widely known, when not everybody is already using your software, it's a lot more difficult to hire people, because you're convincing them to believe in your dream as well as, when they take the plunge. That's a little bit different to, now we're in a position where when we talk to people, they've already heard of Slack and they're probably excited about the product and excited to work on it. But yeah, that wasn't the case in the past, but it's definitely getting easier for us over time. On the other hand, we're competing with every big company that's in the Valley for talent.
Yeah. And how much of that staff is engineering?
Engineering is about a quarter of the company now. Okay. Yeah.
One of the things that Slack gets relatively good marks for on that front is diversity. It's a big problem in the Valley. I mean, yep. We're like two white guys with beards sitting on stage right now, and I think that's a problem, right?
Yeah.
And Slack gets relatively good marks for that. How have you guys thought about diversity? When did you start thinking about it? How has that affected the way that you hire?
Yeah. I mean, so there are four co-founders of Slack, and we're all white dudes with beards. Yeah, we all have beards. And so we started from from the same bad point that a lot of companies start from. But we focused on diversity very early on, when the company was sub 50 people. And I think that was a key win for us because if you're the first person from any underrepresented minority to join a company and it's the company of 100 people and none of them are like you, then that's a lot more difficult. That's a difficult leap to take. Because we focused on diversity early on, that's really like a self-perpetuating thing. It makes it much easier to hire a diverse workforce as we grow.
And I mean, aside from it being a feel-good sort of thing, is there any concrete benefit to doing that?
We feel that there's a social responsibility to the world that we want to be good employers as well, but also a wide variety of views and experiences is super useful for building a very human-centered product. Not everybody who uses Slack is a white dude.
Right, yeah. One of the things that's interesting to me about Slack is it's this piece of business software, but a lot of people seem to have almost an emotional connection with it, the same way they had an emotional connection with Flickr. Can you talk a little bit about you alluded to this earlier, but can you talk a little bit about building some of those emotional connections, or those things that people find delightful in a business product? Why would you do that?
I think initially we just did that for fun because that's the kind of product that we would want to use and we would want to see from other people. It's with this particular category of software, we see people. A typical user is in the app for 10 hours a day. Yeah. We don't want that to be a numbing, sad experience.
But as someone who's making someone at a company who's making an enterprise purchasing decision often isn't thinking about, oh, this software is going to be delightful for my people to use.
Yep. I mean, the way that Slack has typically seen adoption is not because the CIO goes out and decides, I'm going to buy Slack and force everybody to use it, but instead through a more bottoms-up approach, where a team adopts Slack because they actually find it useful, because they find that they get more work done, because they find that their communication is more transparent. And so the team starts using Slack, and then we see it spreads to other teams in the company, and it grows that way. So what's been more important for us for growth is to have a product that people love using to the extent that they convince their friends to use it, rather than selling it to the...
You have evangelists inside companies who force the product on their business. Is that more or less?
I wouldn't use the word force, but I see what you're saying.
And then how do you turn those people into paying customers?
Just by the virtue of the product being useful. It's like if it makes their life more useful, then they're willing to pay for it.
And can you talk a little bit about what the difference is between a free version? One of the things that has made Slack so hot, I think, in the Valley is that it does have this recurring revenue. Can you talk a little about how the free tiers versus the paid tiers work?
Yeah, it's a fairly classic freemium model where there are limitations on the free tier. So it's like if you're running a very small team, you can go out and use the free tier and it will probably be enough for you. And there are limitations around the platform use and how many integrations, how many bots you can install on the free tier. And it's mostly around that. Yeah. And then there's further security and administration controls at the paid tiers that are more useful for companies.
One of the things that we were talking about this last night, that I find interesting about Slack is it's got these very thoughtful interactions in it. For example, the do not disturb mode. Slack is a product that could make you be on 24 hours a day. It can kind of contribute to the always-on nature of smartphones. But you built this do not disturb product into it, which lets you kind of go offline. Can you tell me how that works and how that shows your thinking at Slack?
Yeah, I think do not disturb mode, so we launched that, I think, earlier this year, and allows you to set a schedule for when you don't want to receive push notifications to your phone. But it goes a little bit further than that. For if I IM you at night, it will say, Matt's in do not disturb mode. Would you like to disturb him anyway? And then have a link to go disturb him. And the first thought you'd have about it is that that feature is built for you as the person who doesn't want to be disturbed. But it's also a useful feature for me, because if I'm awake at midnight and think, I have this great message to send Matt, but I don't really want to wake him up because it's not actually very important, then do not disturb is powerful for that, because it lets you say, it's okay to send me messages right now. I won't deal with them until the morning. And so, thinking about that exchange from both ends.
At which point you forget in the morning to send it if you wait like that.
It's still, it's still marked as white in your client.
Well, Cal, I think we're out of time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you very much.